This is the leader who's been slaughtering innocent civilians in Ukraine, who's displaced over 3 million people, who has led forces with civilian attacks and casualties, including children, that are widely condemned, not just by the United States, as war criminals. And here is what the former president is doing, reaching out to Putin right now.
As long as Putin now is not exactly a fan of our country, let him explain because Chris Wallace wouldn't let me ask the question. Why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Bidens, both of them, $3.5 million for them? That's a lot of money. She gave him $3.5 million. So now I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it. I think we should know that answer. I think Putin now would be willing to probably give that answer. I'm sure he knows.
This is the former president who is seen all over the world as a representation of the United States government, making a request of the person that the United States is trying to constrain in Ukraine in foreign policy, and citing specifically the fact that Putin is an adversary. The details there that Trump assumed or asserted as some kind of known facts are wrong. You should know that. These have been previously debunked and discredited. They were pushed before the election. These were the conspiracy theories that Donald Trump said in his losing bid for re-election were very, very big on the internet. That's a quote. Now, there is a pattern here. This is now, going into these midterms, the third election in a row where Donald Trump has brazenly asked a foreign government to intervene on his behalf. And remember, whatever people say now, whatever the Republican Party claims now, this stuff was considered at the time so universally bad that Republicans and Democrats condemned the first one. Indeed, many Republicans tried to say it couldn't be serious. It had to be a joke, because if we're serious, it would be bad to ask for this help from Russia, from Putin. This first one was 2016.
I will tell you this. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
At the time, many, many people, including the leaders of the Republican Party, did not expect that person to become president. As president, he went further to the act that got him impeached, and for many Americans who are busy living life and living check to check, made many Americans more aware of Ukraine, not a country that is always in the center of American foreign policy or talked about that much. Well, it's in the center of all of our minds now, because we've seen so many innocent Ukrainians fleeing for their lives. It was Donald Trump who made it very clear he didn't care about the livelihood or the human rights or the safety of the Ukrainian people, as long as he could get what he wanted to go after the Bidens. This was going into the 2020 race when Donald Trump did a thing that many called extortion, bribery, or betrayal of office, trying to extort Ukraine.
President Trump asked his Ukrainian counterpart to investigate his political foe, Joe Biden.
President Trump says, "I'd like you to do us a favor." He goes on to later bring up his political opponent, Joe Biden.
Mr. Trump did order a hold on military aid to Ukraine just days before a phone call with the country's leader.
That was action, not just words, and certainly not the jokes as some claimed in 2016. We had a whole impeachment over it. We had a whole Senate trial. That's a big deal. Information was gleaned. Evidence was gleaned. We did learn things. But in the end, even after Mitch McConnell said that this was potentially convictable, it was the Democrats who voted to convict in large part, and only one Republican senator basically voting to convict. Now, at the time, Republican Senator Susan Collins, who had voiced criticism of some of Trump's conduct there, said, well, the then president learned a, quote, pretty big lesson from the impeachment. That was her defense of voting to acquit. All right. And here we are. And this is not a drill. Donald Trump did learn a lesson, Senator Collins, but it was the exact opposite of what Senator Collins claimed. Donald Trump learned that while Democrats and that one vote from Mitt Romney would come around to convict him for that kind of conduct, the entire elected Republican Party actually said this kind of stuff was okay. Asking foreign governments to interfere in the U.S. elections was okay. That includes the self-proclaimed hawks, the supposed proponents of America's strong moral exceptionalism abroad. They all found themselves cowing to a newly ascendant political Trump-Putin axis. And why? Because they didn't want to face a mean tweet or a possible Republican primary. Mind you, most of these people don't ever face those primaries, and they're in safe seats and safe red states. But just the possibility of that was too much to bear to stand up to the Trump-Putin axis. And that is the wider context that brings us to a story like today. And I got to tell you, this is more significant than another dose of petty right-wing politics, although that plays into the fuel. This is a former president and the bulk of a major political party in the United States saddling up to an adversary, Vladimir Putin, right now during this war. And yes, Russia is listening. The Kremlin-run TV over there is now calling for regime change here with an eye on Donald Trump, who's acting out this way on the world stage. They refer directly to getting, quote, their partner Trump back in the U.S. White House.
Нам, нашему народу, пришло время призвать народ Соединенных Штатов сменить режим в США досрочно и снова помочь нашему партнеру Трампу стать президентом.
We're joined now by political strategist and former Obama campaign operative Che Komanduri and the journalist and founder of Talking Points Memo, Josh Marshall. Che, if it were a movie, it would be interesting to look at the interplay of domestic politics, international media, and a raging war. But it's not a movie. It's a conflagration with serious consequences. I'm not one to sit in this anchor chair and try to lecture people about the American interest or what's the right thing to do on every issue. But this is really far over the line and would seem to have very real consequences during the war. Your analysis on both the politics and the policy implications with people's lives on the line.
Yeah, the reality is that we talk about what's in the American interest, but all that Donald Trump cares about is what is in his interest. And one thing that he knows very clearly that is in his interest is that this invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin has been a disaster for him, both personally and politically. So that is exactly why he is doing this. He needs to move the message frame back to something that worked for him. So it's not just doubling down on support for Putin, which he's certainly done. There was a period of silence in terms of praise for Putin for a while. That's obviously now over. But the message frame that really worked for him was the idea that what really mattered was the enemy at home, not the dictators abroad. The enemy at home, the Democrats at home, Hunter Biden at home, that's who we should be fighting with, not these dictators abroad. And I think you're seeing this across the GOP in a wide variety of spectrums. But this was a very blatant attempt by Donald Trump to sort of move the message frame back to something that worked for him.
Josh?
You know, like with a lot of things about Donald Trump, it's shocking, but not surprising. As you know, as we found out in your intro, I mean, he's done this over and over again. You know, it's not surprising. And, you know, we know Donald Trump. We know he does these things in that way, too. We know his character. But I think it drives home something that there are a lot of foreign leaders, you know. Vladimir Putin's not the only foreign leader. There's lots of places conceivably that they could come up with that they're going to find the motherload of dirt about Hunter Biden or Joe Biden or whatever. But it always comes back to Vladimir Putin, you know, and even in a time right now where, you know, Putin's become a little more unpopular in the United States in the last couple months. And I think, you know, look, that just tells us something about Donald Trump and something he has with Vladimir Putin. Now, I will say, I think at the same time, this is playing into something that Donald Trump is losing some of his juice in the GOP. He's still the leader of the party, but, you know, we saw this situation with Mo Brooks, Dan, and I believe it's Alabama. If I have that wrong, I apologize. Where he's getting in, you know, pulling his endorsements and getting in fights with people he endorses. He's trying to drive Brian Kemp in Georgia from power. Looks like Brian Kemp's going to win his primary. Trump is losing some of his grip on the GOP, and I suspect that even though they will say nothing, that this is making at least some elected Republicans say, you know what, I don't want to do that again. That wasn't fun, and this is what's going on here. So I do think both these things are happening at the same time. It's still his party. It's still Trumpism's party. But I do think this will play into at least some loosening of the grip that Trump currently has over the GOP.
Well, and Josh Marshall, you may be competing with James Carville for short catchphrases, because that wasn't fun. Could apply to past year or the year 2020, the year 2016. I mean, just a lot of recent years. That wasn't fun. Yeah. But all levity aside, you're referring to the exhaustion of these Republicans who look at this so-called threat. And then the question of, if you do get a primary, and again, in politics, as Jay knows so well, just getting a primary changes the entire year in life of that person in office, even if they beat it back. But if they start winning, to Josh's point, if they start winning these primaries, Jay, then what are you afraid of? He's banned from Twitter. You don't know if he's going to run again. And on the political calculus, you might be able to win the primary. Having said that, I've got sound here from the upper chamber. This isn't even House members, from the senators here, who sound downright fine with the latest from Trump, or the Trump-Putin axis that I mentioned. Jay, take a listen.
Listen, I never give the former president advice, so he could talk about what he wants to talk about. I am interested to hear what happens with Hunter Biden, though, and the federal investigation into him, and I imagine that we'll be learning more about that, so we'll see. Sounds pretty serious.
Well, I don't know if he has dirt on Biden. If he does, he should reveal it.
Jay?
Yeah, I think what you're hearing is those GOP senators understand that what Trump has done in trying to move the message to Hunter Biden away from Vladimir Putin, they still believe that that is a winning play and a winning strategy for them. That what really works for the GOP electorate is a war against other Americans. You know, that's something that Pat Buchanan had some insight into in the 90s when he said communism now over. Let's talk about affirmative action and all these sort of domestic things where these liberals are pushing these things on us. Let's own the libs. And I think that they recognize that what Donald Trump was doing was something that was very beneficial for them. I mean, keep in mind, that's kind of what Ron DeSantis has been doing. You know, it's not any coincidence that he signed this Don't Say Gay bill during this war, during this invasion. He wants to really say that, you know, forget about Vladimir Putin, the Chinese, these dictators abroad. The real enemy is that gay couple down the street. You know, we saw that with the Judge Jackson hearings. The real enemy is that African-American woman on the bench. The enemy has to be the enemy at home. Trump believed that that was a winning strategy for him, and he plays it out in one way. The entire GOP is really in on this in just sort of different areas of emphasis, different tangents that they pick, but that's what they really believe. The enemy, the real enemy are other Americans.
Yeah, and Josh, that goes also to the fact that the war, Josh, the war has completely ruined the little bit of benefit that Putin had gotten from this whole Trump dance for 4 years, because it's just a reality. And that also, people talk about, oh, Fox News and Tucker says this or that, but we checked, and granted, this is a weird part of our jobs here, but because I don't know what Mussolini's approval numbers were, Josh, but Putin's disapproval numbers are off the charts among independents and Democrats. They used to be perhaps concerningly lower among Republicans, but now they're back up to 75% negative, even among Republicans, because even those who rely on Fox News or Facebook or whatever, there's certain things here with the way this war is going. They see what the shelling is. They see what the facts are. And if you have any connection to the military, if you know anyone in the military family, you get a conversational piece of input about all this. And we've had our generals and others on here. So you see what Putin's doing. He's brutalizing a civilian landscape. And almost everyone in the Republican Party in the electorate says Putin bad. But now Donald Trump still wants Putin's help. Because you know what? I guess he's too weak to win elections on his own. I guess he can't just win elections with the force of his ideas, words, campaigning. He's so weak, he needs this putative potential war criminal abroad to help him in here. I mean, it's not the strongest message with those negatives. What do you see there, Josh?
Yeah, I think, you know, and I think those quotes from the Republican senators kind of told the case. They want the benefit. They want it. They want to talk about Hunter Biden. They want to talk about all the, you know, many tens of millions of dollars he's gotten corruptly from overseas and all these conspiracy theories. But they also kind of don't want to touch the Trump part of it. They want to move it to Hunter Biden. And they don't want to cross Donald Trump. They want to get the benefit. But again, I think you can see they're kind of like, I think they're hoping like, all right, let's move on to Ron DeSantis or something like this. I do think that is happening. But again, it shows us again, why does it always come back to Vladimir Putin for Donald Trump? Yeah. It speaks for itself that he's not popular right now, and he still goes back to him. So something's driving that's not public opinion. What can you say?
And what is it? And as responsible journalists, we ask those questions. We can't always just fill them in with any vagaries, but what is it? I have one more thing briefly, Che. I want us to go from Moscow to Ohio, where we see the Senate primary, and it shows you some of where the mood is, at least in a room stacked with partisan Republicans, and whether a moderator can even mention facts. Take a look.
5 million more people voted than were registered to vote.
The claim that Mr. Gibbons just made about more ballots cast than registered voters has been fact-checked, and no evidence has been found to support it.
The 2020 election was stolen from Donald J. Trump.
Again, several claims Mr. Mandel made have been fact-checked.
Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, put $435 million to buy up boards of elections all over the country in big battleground states.
Again, there are a couple statements that have been fact-checked. No evidence found to support them.
Che, what do you see there?
What I see is that the GOP is a house that has been built by Donald Trump. So you may say, well, maybe Donald Trump isn't the guy you want in the House anymore, but he still owns it. It's still his. It's still something that he erected. This is his ego and his ability to change the message and to dictate terms to the GOP that is still driving this. So as much as we may say, oh, they're moving on to Ron DeSantis, et cetera, they are still very much in his house. Donald Trump knows it, and Donald Trump knows how to push his message and his ideas forward. So I think we should never underestimate him.
And I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. Completely agree with that. I think both things are happening at the same time. He, as you said, he built the house. The big lie is still orthodoxy. It's even more orthodoxy. In some ways, Trumpism is totally triumphant. The conspiracy theories, the big lie, all this kind of stuff. He himself, they may think he has too much mileage on him to be president again. But yeah, it's still his Republican Party that's been totally remade in his image.
Right, and as you say, it's unusual historically to have people in a party work so hard, bend over backwards, to resuscitate the losing candidate. When Mitt Romney lost, you didn't have Republicans running around saying, let's pretend he won. And so Che's analogy of that house and then who's going to live in it holds. And Che, was it not Rick Ross, the boss, who said, I built it ground up, you bought it renovated?
I'm sure Rick Ross did say that. One thing else I'll say is that landlords generally don't evict themselves. They may evict a tenant who lives in the house, but they don't evict themselves. And the problem for the GOP is you're trying to get the landlord to evict himself from his own house. Good luck with that.
I'm running over on time, but my last short question, Josh, is have we tortured this real estate analogy enough?
No, I don't think so. I think it has still mileage on it. So
it has more mileage. Well,
yes.
It went meta, but I did want to ask about that amidst the seriousness of the breach of U.S. foreign policy. Well, you're a writer. I want to thank Josh and Che for covering all that in depth and tell everyone what we have coming up. There's a big moment here in the January 6th program.